we weren't built to sell a product. We built a product to get, for our end users to adopt it. And in the beginning, when we first came to market, we actually struggled a lot because there was a lot of education of like, no, this product is going to actually be used. We didn't build a product that looks good to the decision makers. We built a product that looks good to the end users.
When you don't involve your end user in the process of making the tech, that's exactly what you're going to get. A very short-lived experience.
Right, training in our industry for most companies is training on technology, training on how to use the systems that we use, not training on how to be a better leasing agent per se, not training on how to be a better manager per se. The question is, why is that? And I think the answer is because, again, the industry isn't focusing enough on creating easy-to-use systems, systems that are intuitive enough to be used by people without a college degree or an accounting background.
If you're going to like a long onboarding process, that's like a huge red flag, huge red flag. Even like training, everything that's beyond like 1 or 2 hours to show you the basic functions, it should be a red flag.
We just don't know. We're trying this, we're trying to see how if we add AI here, how that will impact this. If we can build a model to do that, then we can do this. And, we're trying this, and maybe we can empower our users to do that. But all of it was...
Sean, this was a long time coming. Welcome to Atlanta. Welcome back to Atlanta.
Thank you, Adrian. Yeah, it's exciting to be here.
Super excited to have you here today. I want to go and start with the origins, your origins. I think you're known mainly for being the CEO of AppWork, but then not so many people know that you have a very strong background in operations. And I want to start the conversation with you sharing with us, how did you start in operations? Like, what were you doing? How did you get in multifamily?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So I started my career in the industry. This is where I started, humble beginnings. I started as an operator, worked my way up, my first job to a regional manager. I then had an opportunity to join a more up-and-coming, newer company at the time as a regional vice president, and then shortly thereafter became the VP of operations, and then eventually SVP of operations. But that's kind of where I started in the career to where I was when I left the operations side of the industry.
It's very interesting because I'm getting to know a lot of founders, property founders that don't have any property management background. And I think this could be tricky when you build a product, because I don't think that you could build something you can fully understand. However, I don't expect that every CEO or founder will have that experience, but they will have someone on their team that has been the operator and the end user that understands, that could actually get the product in their own hands and say, this is not how this works. Or like, this is amazing. This is exactly what we need. That type of insight. So I'm very excited when I see someone like you that made a step over on the PropTech side, and he builds with a mindset of an operator for operators.
Yep.
Tell me about your journey in property management after you became the vice president of operations. How long you been in that position?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was there for in that specific role for about 8 years.
For about 8 years.
Yeah.
You must have learned a lot of stuff in 8 years, seen a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I learned a lot. I mean, every day I'm still learning, but that was definitely a point in my career where there was a lot to learn. I probably learned the most, meaning of all the knowledge that I've gained throughout my career. That was probably the period of time where most of it came from. When I joined the company, we had probably around 1,000 units, and we scaled up to, during that time, I think our peak was about 12.5, almost 13,000 units in the portfolio. So
that's great. Well, so you've been there from the beginning, and you actually helped scaling about more than 10x, 12, 13 times the original size. We both know, and everybody that's an operator also knows, that you don't run 1,000 units like you run 3, 5, 7, or 13,000. So I would like to get from you best lessons that you have learned from scaling a business, from actually being right there, like leading this business scaling. What were some things that you have learned in the process? Some great lessons.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll actually tell you something that I've noticed that I learned more after I left the operations side of things and switched over to the vendor side, because it was only when I became a vendor so to speak. I hate the term vendor, but that I got a lens. Up until then, I always had my vantage point was always what we were doing at our company. Obviously, through networking and industry events, you're able to hear from other operators, hear what they were doing, what was working, what wasn't working. But all of a sudden, when I became a vendor, I got an incredible amount of insights into all of our clients and how they operate. And that's really where I realized that there's no two operations that are the same. There's no right way to do something. There's also no wrong way to do something. Every company operates differently, with different infrastructure, different structure, different SOPs. I've seen, some SOPs that work really well at some companies and some SOPs that don't work really well at other companies. So I don't think there's a right way. Obviously, as a company scales, you have to start implementing more of an infrastructure. I think that was a big thing that we had to focus on as an operator as we were scaling, as any company does, right? I mean, on the startup side too, on the technology side, obviously as we're scaling the technology, we also have to create an infrastructure. But I think that's equally as important for any company, but especially as an operator. On the multifamily side, something that we do have that's relatively unique is we're a very people-heavy company. We're a very people-heavy organization, very people-heavy industry. So you're managing large groups of people. And I think for that, just having a proper infrastructure is more important than probably other industries.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to people-heavy operations because there's a lot out there to unpack. I want to get your thoughts on several things. Yep. But I do want to ask you next, what are the things that you have learned as being on a PropTech side and actually learning, getting exposed to various cultures, various size companies as a service provider that you wish you knew when you were an operator?
Yeah, no, excellent question. I think I learned how important risk management is. I think that's something that ties back to everything that we always do operationally, from every move in, move out, every lease that we get to on the maintenance side, every work order that we get, every work order that we complete, every time we go into a unit. Just about everything that we do has this component of risk management, from potential liabilities to insurance claims and all that kind of fun stuff. And I think as an operator, I think that's really the guiding principles of what should be our SOPs, or that should be much more embedded into our SOPs.
Let's talk about how AppWork came to life. So let's roll back in time and tell me how the idea of AppWork, maybe was it called AppWork to begin with? I'm curious.
It actually wasn't. No.
Yeah, okay.
It wasn't. Yeah. So shortly after I joined the property management company, we hired a few software engineers that were put on my team, on the operations team, just to help solve the operational pain points of the company. We were a very tech-forward company. We weren't looking to replace our tech stack. We were looking just to use technology to help us be more innovative. So as a company, we were using Yardi as our core PMS. And then on top of that, we were using, all the new innovative tech solutions that we're able to find that were on the market that we felt that was positively impacting our operation. On the side, we just started building our own technology. It was just like whatever we couldn't solve through an existing technological solution, let's try to build for that. Or essentially, what we thought we were gonna end up with was like a hodgepodge catch-all solution with a little bit of this, a little bit of that, one thing that handles this. Yeah, so it was really interesting. So we kind of did that for about 5 years, where again we had this team of engineers just working on my team, trying to catch all the operational inefficiencies, if you want to call it that, that we had to help us streamline the company, scale the company, and operate better. And after doing that for about 5 years, we look back at what we created, and it was really interesting to find that organically, it's not like we set out to solve a specific pain point. It was just operationally what came up that day. And everything that we created, not everything, I'd say about 90% of the technology we created was all solving one problem in one way, shape, or form. And that one problem was maintenance.
Why maintenance? I'm super intrigued, right? Yeah. How did you end up with solving 90% of what you were solving just maintenance, right? Because obviously operations
there's a lot.
It's a lot,
there's a lot,
right?
There's a lot that goes into it.
You ended up at the end of the journey saying that 90% of what you've been building and solving was maintenance. So I'm very curious, how did this happen? Tell me about that journey. How did it turn out to be 90% maintenance focus?
Yeah, I think It just exactly what it was. It was us building something organically. So it wasn't like we have this pain point, let's solve for that. It was just like every day that we'd wake up and like, hey, in the company, something came up. So now let's try to solve for that thing that came up. And I think what it boiled down to, because when we came to the same realization, we're like, wow, that's incredible, right? I mean, there's so many different avenues we could have gone. And why is it that so much of what we built was all focused around one problem? And I think it's just the answer was just right in front of us, and it's pretty obvious. It just maintenance had such an important impact on the success or lack thereof of any asset. And that was also the area where the technology on the market was the weakest. So, maybe some other areas that were also important that we could have focused on, we just didn't need to because there was already existing solutions for that on the market and we were already using those solutions. But maintenance was an area that had such a large impact on our operations. So that's just kind of where we ended up, or, kind of naturally.
Share some weaknesses that you discover in PMSs and all the technology that was available that existing technology couldn't solve, and then you had to build it.
Yeah, I mean, I think each point of the system, every feature that we built and nuance of it came from a different pain point. But I mean, one of them was like a really fundamental level. I remember we had a property. I don't remember the exact numbers, but we had a distressed asset and we were trying to, figure out what's going on. We looked in Yardi and they had a ton of open work orders. So let's just say it was a 250 unit property. I'm going to make it up. They had, 500 open work orders, right? And a ton of open work orders. I remember we had a conversation with the property manager, hey, we got to get this under control, right? Let's come up with a game plan. It was over a period of time. It wasn't like, hey, let's close out all the work orders tomorrow, but like over a period of time, maybe over the next week, let's bring it down to, reduce the open work orders by 50% or whatever the percentages was at the time. And I remember coming into work the next day, I looked in Yardi and she had like 0 open work orders. And she was all excited. She sent us an email, hey guys, we got the work orders under control.
You must be a very powerful motivator.
And I'm like, yeah, that's really exciting, but I could promise you that we didn't complete 500 work orders or whatever that number was. We didn't go in and complete it, which to me exposed a very glaring flaw in our, the way we view data, the way we make decisions based off of data, is that we couldn't trust any of the data that we had, because this was done with, obviously, yes, we were aware of this one and we knew to check, so to speak, the before and after, but how much of that was actually happening on a daily basis where a manager would just go in and say, not maliciously, but like, oh, this resident hasn't called and complained for a while. I'm just going to go ahead and complete their work orders. I was going to mark them as complete in the system, or, for whatever the reason was, whatever the justification is, we all of a sudden have this concept where we can no longer trust the data that's in our platform. So that was like a big moment for us. We were like, hey, we need to build a solution that just has data that we can trust, where there's, managers aren't, or anybody for that matter, isn't just going in and closing out work orders that aren't truly complete. And even if somebody does do that, there's checks and balances in place where, for example, where the resident would get an email letting them know that their work order has been closed out, right? And then the resident straight from there has the option to reopen it if it's still an issue. Or they could leave a rating and a review. And like this, a person who's closing it out knows that, hey, if we close out this work order and it wasn't actually done, I'm going to get a negative rating on that work order.
I'm curious, what's your take on a large PMS program software that has all the bells and whistles and actually could solve it's like a 360 solution. It has accounting, it has leasing, it has, everything, right? There has procurement, also has maintenance, right? Why a software like that, and large players mainly, right? Why they don't build like a strong suite for maintenance to solve those problems?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I don't think it's maintenance specific. I don't think they build a strong product on any specific problem. I think their whole mindset is we're going to be a more generalist platform. So we're going to, a lot of the main PMSs today are like at the core, they're really accounting systems. And then they have solutions that kind of break out from there. And I don't think if you look at any one of the PMSs, I don't think if you take one problem outside of accounting, because some of those I think do a very good job at that. Outside of accounting, you could take a CRM, some of those CRMs are just they're not the greatest, and it's just a very different business model for them. Their business model is not to be the best in every scenario. Their business model is just to, so to speak, be the jack of all trades, right? So just to have a little bit of everything versus a bit of one thing.
You took the words out of my mouth, because we know what happens when you're a jack of all trades, you're a master of none. So very interesting take, right? So want to be the one-stop shop, and basically we just need to perform like, around average, and then, grow the business. So that's kind of the business model. You mentioned earlier, and I promise to get back to this statement of yours, that we're a people-heavy industry.
Yeah.
You and I both know that payroll, it's probably like the highest expense line item in a budget. And of course, what happened with expenses? They get trimmed down, or we try to eliminate them, but at least, to minimize them. And now comes the question, two opportunities that I think the industry has seen in recent years. The two opportunities were COVID, and centralization kind of follow right after that. COVID started because we couldn't interact in person, like the thought was we're going to build technology to fill the gap. And then we ended up with so much technology, and we figured if we were able to run during COVID, like without an interaction, what if we actually bring more technology and just like trim some payroll out there? How do you think that played for institutional management companies? Did it play out well from what you're seeing? Adopting a lot of technology and trying to replace people with technology so far?
Yeah, I think it's. I think it really depends. It depends on the solutions that they're adopting, but it also depends on the company that's adopting it. Because there are some companies that just take an off the shelf solution, implement it, and then just say, "Okay, great, we're now using this technology." In those scenarios, I don't think they're getting the better end of the bargain. I think if they would really dig under the hood, they may realize that it's causing more harm than good. Whereas you have on the other end, you have some companies that implement a solution and then live with that solution. They have their team that's constantly monitoring and adjusting that solution, working with the vendor on any issues that do come up. And anytime maybe some suggestions are, based on what they're seeing operationally, based on the data, hey, we should make some adjustments to the platform. In those cases, I think that the operators made up pretty well, but I think on the other side, I think if they're not doing that, they don't have that relationship with the supplier. And obviously, you need the supplier, right? So if the supplier is not being receptive to that feedback, or not willing to, so to speak, have that relationship and working hand in hand with the operator, then yeah, I could see a few scenarios of how that doesn't go so well.
The bigger the ship, the harder to steer away from a course. And I'm talking about here, like, very large property companies. Not so much flexibility out there, and there's a lot of silo. I've noticed this myself. Almost 2 years ago at AppTech, I was in an audience on a panel with chief technology officers from some very large property management groups. The conversation was about technology and how overwhelmed all the operators are. It's just so much technology. Like right after that panel, I embraced this. I started saying, we started by thinking that we're helping people with technology, and what we end up doing is to punish them with technology. So instead, like helping, it's like a punishment. And one of the things that, sound bites that really caught my attention, one of the CTOs was saying, we require that our leasing agents, the most entry-level basic position in an industry, to be proficient on 63 different pieces of software. And another CEO that was right there on the panel said, well, you're still good at 63, we're at 67. So that's incredibly, unrealistic, and it will never work really. So what that does generates like a lot of stress, a lot of burnout, and a lot of turnover. So how do we as an industry address the situation? Because obviously something that's not working, but I talk to leaders all the time. I don't think that, from all the conversations I have heard, a very clear path about, I never heard, or I'm yet to hear someone saying, I think we're on a way to figure this out. They're just saying we're looking at it, like they still, and you're talking about overlap, stuff that's not being used, stuff that gets very low adoption rates, all that stuff, it's in a tech stack out there. It's just sitting out there, and you're paying for it. What do you think? What would be a way for an industry to just kind of like do a great thorough audit and just only keep what they need?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot to unpack there. But
Sure.
one of the things that I think is, I mean, my mindset is, number one is, I think one of the problems with our tech stack today is that, again, remember at the core, every PMS, the number one core product that everybody has to know how to use, which is the PMS, they're all based on accounting systems. So imagine you take somebody, like you said, at the lowest starting point. I shouldn't say low, but the starting point in the industry. Yeah, the entry level starting point in the industry. Somebody that we typically find from the hospitality industry, things like that. That's really typically where we're recruiting from. Oftentimes, people don't start in the industry. I think what's in great industry, you don't even need a college degree. So you're taking these people without a college degree, young people, and you're putting them in front of an accounting software, and say, learn this. Right. And then obviously you take that and then you tack that on with 65 other similar products that are, again, not easy to use and burdensome. And obviously that's just, that creates a whole level of issues in and of itself. So I think number one is, I don't think this is a problem for the operators. I think this is a problem in the industry from the supplier side, is that people have to focus more on creating usable products. And I think that will solve 5 of the issues that we mentioned. I think it'll solve for having a bunch of systems that that you have low adoption on. I think that will solve for having to train people on so many different systems. I always use the example of, did you ever get trained on the way here? You were using Waze. Did anybody teach you how to use it?
No.
So why is training, so to speak, right? Training in our industry for most companies is training on technology, training on how to use the systems that we use, not training on how to be a better leasing agent per se, not training on how to be a better manager per se. The question is, why is that? And I think the answer is because, again, the industry isn't focusing enough on creating easy to use systems that are intuitive enough to be used by people without a college degree or an accounting background. So yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. But obviously, companies always have to be mindful of, a lot of times technology sounds exciting and they sign up for it, and then they look 6 months later and they realize the adoption's not there. You have to know when to pull the plug. I remember as an operator, we signed up for, and they're a great company. It was an LMS, so a learning management solution that was geared towards, we did it for compliance reasons. We had a whole bunch of different curricula that our new hires had to go through. And then it was the idea there is post-hire, we then offered continuous education to our teams. And one of the things that I realized after a while is that our maintenance teams actually weren't taking any of these trainings. I realized that we had a 0% adoption rate on the maintenance teams. So I went in there, I said, that's interesting. I said, let me take one of these trainings and let me see what it's like. And then I could go back to the team and like, hey, I did it. It's not that difficult. You guys do it. So I took a training, actually took 2 trainings, I think, 2 courses. And then I went back to the team. I said, no one's ever allowed to take another training. Not that no one ever took one, but I just said it was just, I realized how burdensome it was. I realized why no one actually ended up finishing any of these classes. And then I realized that as a company, I think for us to push our teams to do that would have been a big mistake. So instead of coming out of that training saying, hey, everybody, I did it, now you do it. It was, hey, everybody, I did it, now no one else should do it. We ended up stopping to use that system. But yeah, I think that's another thing.
I love that, you acknowledge this, shortcoming, right? Because that should have been done up front before everything was implemented. But in reality, let's just be honest, this happens way more often than anyone, would like to admit. I think the main reason why this happens is that the way PropTech companies are approaching the clientele, and I'm going to explain. So typically a founder builds the company, hires people that could, write code, developers, and they develop a product that, they feel great about it. Then they hire a bunch of salespeople.
Yeah.
And they go straight to the top of the organization, to the people that actually sign the contract, that write the checks. Whether that's CEO, chief operating officer, senior VP, very top, right? Very high level. But what happens right there, I'm not seeing the end user represented in the process at all, right? What is your end user? How did the end user contribute to building that product? And also, the people that you do the demos to, they're not the end user. They look at something, it might look great, on a TV screen, on a presentation deck, but then that product that they approve goes back to the end user. And the end user is gonna decide, is this a product that I'm going to use or not? And then the adoption rates are telling everything. But back to what I was just saying, when you don't involve your end user in the process of making the tech, that's exactly what you're gonna get, a very short-lived experience. I'm going to add something to how we think we're going to solve, this problem, this mess, clean it up. I think that there's technology out there that's being built, especially to audit technology for each property management company. You're gonna bring a AI power solution, you deploy it as a property management company, and you're going to learn. Low adoption rates, technology that's never been used, or very seldom, and then overlap. How do you eliminate that? It's going to write an audit for you, and also technology that it's not working. Back to what you were saying with Waze. With me, I use Uber, right? And I ask people, do you know of any training video for Uber? And the answer is no, because it doesn't exist. And it doesn't exist for a reason, because they make it so easy for anyone to use that you could just download it on your phone and automatically you will know. You don't have to be like a tech savvy person. And that goes to, this should be the gold standard for every product that's been built in the industry. If you're going to like a long onboarding process, that's like a huge red flag. Huge red flag. Even like training, everything that's beyond like 1 or 2 hours that show you the basic functions, it should be a red flag. If you need more than that, like if it takes you more to explain your product, you probably don't know it well enough.
100%.
Yeah, and how that's going to be successful for an end user, right? Frictionless experience is not going to be. So I'm thinking there's technology that's being built as we speak, is going to be deployed. And it's going to tell the operators exactly. It's going to build a report and say, your leasing agents are spending so much time on this, actually trying to, like, the software that's supposed to help them, like, just give them time back in their day. They're actually spending trying to help prospects and residents navigate through it, because it's not frictionless. There's a lot of friction there. I think AI is going to solve the problem. All of your take on it?
Yeah, I think AI is going to solve a lot, and I think we're going to see in the coming years, to what extent that's going to do. And I'm excited to see a solution like that come to market. I think, yes, demos are often done and decisions are made by people that are not the end users. I think one advantage that we had as a company, and I think there are others out there too, that had a similar start to us, like us, I would say, is that we weren't built to sell a product. We built a product to get, for our end users to adopt it. And in the beginning, when we first came to market, we actually struggled a lot, because there was a lot of education of like, no, this product is going to actually be used. And we didn't build a product that looks good, so to speak, meaning our product looks great. We didn't build a product that looks good to the decision makers. We built a product that looks good to the end users, and we had to figure out how do we pitch that? How do we sell that? Because it's something that was very unique for us. I think that's where vendors need to focus, meaning it's not just about operators needing to involve the end users in the decision-making process. I think that's the obvious part. I think the less obvious takeaway is that I think vendors need to focus more on building solutions for the end users than for the decision makers. Because when you focus on building technology for the decision makers, which from a business perspective, if you think about it, that makes the most sense, because I'm building the technology for what's going to sell, for the people that are going to make that decision, sign the contracts. But then you're going to end up with this new AI-powered software that you're talking about that's going to go 12 months later and start canceling all your contracts, because we got a lot of contracts, but no one's actually using it, right? Whether it's the AI software or the companies themselves are waking up one day and realizing that, hey, this was a good software in theory, right? If it could actually be used and solve the pain points that the salespeople promised us it would solve, then it would be really neat. But they're going to wake up and say, no one's actually using it, so what use does it actually have?
Do you see the PMSs having a future in the way they operate today in the context of AI and what AI can do?
A few things. Number one is, I don't know the future. I always whenever people ask me like what I think is going to be in the future, I always say if I knew the answer to that, I'd probably be living on some remote island right now. I'd own my own island, so I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I think I think the industry is ready for some kind of shakeup in terms of the standard operating model. We've been doing it for the same way for a very long time, where you have these, so to speak, core PMSs, accounting systems that everybody's kind of, trying to use as their main base of operations. I think there was a period of time around COVID where we all woke up right after COVID and said, whoa, we have software fatigue. We want to consolidate into as small of a tech stack as possible, right? I mean, I went through that same process myself. But I feel like now the industry is coming up with, or waking up to, a different thought process on, and it's less software fatigue. It's more of technology that's going to actually be used. So even if that means me going outside of my PMS, I don't mind having a larger tech stack if the adoption is going to be there. So, if you have a PMS, I'm making it up, I'll use maintenance because we're in the maintenance space, but we're seeing a lot of companies that were saying, hey, yeah, a few years ago, we consolidated into the core maintenance product that our PMS offered. And now we're just realizing we're not getting the adoption. So, even though I'm making a Yardi shop or a RailPage shop, and we don't use anything out of Yardi or RailPage, just if the adoption is not there, then we're going to have to expand our horizons into, one of these point solutions that just focus on that single problem. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think companies are going to look for adoption, right? Companies, even if maybe it's cheaper to bundle it or it's simpler to bundle it with the PMS, I think what companies want is technology that's going to be used and technology that's going to have an impact.
You mentioned an LMS that didn't work out the way, I guess you intended to, or you were hoping to. I want to get your take on the future of LMSs, how they operate. I want to take in context of AI again. And then just for context, right, the typical learning and development department for a property management company builds a curriculum based on your position in a company. If you're a leasing agent, you're going to take these classes. If you're a maintenance technician, you're going to take these classes. This blanket training, I think it's a easy way to try to train people and a very lazy way. and it's not a way that, people will learn. What you're going to end up, having is, just a bunch of employees checking boxes. But then what actually retain and what actually take back and make themselves better, it's very little, if anything. So with this context given, I want you to share some thoughts on the future of training.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I will say, though, if I could push back a little bit,
sure.
I think in terms of, so to speak, the blanket training, the curriculum, I agree with you, but to an extent. I think that the industry, whether it's LMSs or in general, training departments, whether they're hosting, however it is, but delivering kind of general training, I think you need to do that for all the basics. I think sometimes we hire people and we think that they already know a lot, and then they go through these standard trainings and not sophisticated, not pointed trainings, but basic trainings. I'm making it up. I don't know, property management 101, right? I mean, anybody in a property manager position should already know that. But I don't mind them spending the time to take making it up again, a property manager 101 training class, even if some of it's wasting their time, because like this, I know as an operator, I know that my person was trained on the basics. Now, beyond that, right, then yeah, absolutely. Maybe I want to use some data or whatever it is and be a little bit more mindful of the training that I'm offering somebody for two reasons. Number one is I want to be mindful of their time. Right? I mean, every minute that somebody's in training, it's a minute that they're not doing their job. At the same time, again, obviously, if somebody already has a skill, I want to empower them and help them gain the skills that they don't already have versus just, keep battering them with the skill that they already know. And hey, learn more about it, learn it again. But in terms of the future of LMSs in general, again, I can't say the future. Obviously, there's a lot of ideas on how it can evolve. But again, for me, I think one of the frustration points of the typical LMSs is that they take a lot of time, right? So somebody, you have a new hire, even a not a new hire, some of these LMSs, a course could be an hour long, 2 hours long. What I would love to see is more LMSs adopting this micro-learning concept that's easily digestible information that somebody doesn't have to watch or participate in an entire course only to get, learn two things from that they didn't already know, right? Let's just figure out how to get them those 2 points just separately in a 2-minute clip, a 3-minute clip, or a 3-minute course, however you want to call it, however you want to structure it. But that's what I would love to see for the future of LMSs. And I could see use cases for some more drawn out trainings. But I think I think those should be few and far between. And, the standard training that we're asking our team to take, or we're offering to our team, should be easier to access, faster trainings.
I agree with you. I was planning on bringing up micro-learning. I envision this as being a two-step process. First step is going to be get rid of the blanket training and do like a tree. It's like circles. The circle in a core is going to be mandatory classes. You do a very small number of classes, which are fair housing, preventive sexual harassment, and others that are out there. Compliance, exactly. Compliance ones. Second layer comes with whatever the direct supervisor of the person thinks that the person should be taking based on their assessment. And the third layer should be what the employee wants to learn.
Okay.
That's the first step. The second step is going to be having a AI, I call it training body, right? Have an AI training body that is going to learn you as an employee and as a student, I'll say. And then eventually is going to know more about you than you know about yourself, about your needs. And is going to deliver on demand pieces of training, micro-learning, like you say, whether that's a 3-minute video or, just something, literally the option of speaking with that AI to deliver the exact answer to your precise question, versus you having to go to like a 20 or 30-minute class to learn about the general topic when you actually just needed to know maybe something that takes 30 seconds to learn.
Yeah, I mean, again, AI is this massive black hole that we could go down, and anybody can come up with all these different ideas. Again, I think a lot of these ideas are further out than we realize. I think if we don't do it well, I think the adoption or implementation of AI will end up becoming similar to the technology, the massive tech stack that we have today, where we have all these AI tools, and then they're all wrong, meaning I remember we rolled out as an operator an AI tool. I told our team, the only as long as it answers the question correct, it's fantastic, right? But I said, if it doesn't answer the question accurately, then it has the exact opposite effect, because now I think that the question was answered, right? And I may have just lost a prospect because I said I don't have anything available, and I really do have things available, but it delivered it instantly. But what happens if I would have waited a few hours or even a day for my leasing team to respond, who would have responded accurately? I at least wouldn't have, completely shut the door on the lead, right? So, I think in general, we have to be careful about how we use AI and how it's adopted. I still think that, AI is an incredible tool. I think it will shape the future of the industry and obviously the world as we know it. But I think that we're still in the very early stages of it. I went to an AI conference a couple of months ago with a bunch of CTOs and leaders of technology organizations to hear, and it was a conference focused on how are they using AI, what's their thoughts about AI, how are they building AI into their products. And a very common theme of the entire conference was, we just don't know. We're trying this, we're trying to see how if we add AI here, how that will impact this. If we can build a model to do that, then we can do this. And, we're trying this, and maybe we can empower our users to do that. But all of it was maybe, we think, we're trying, we're going to experiment. So again, I think it's obvious that AI has incredible capabilities, but I think it's all about also the model that's trained, right? We could have an AI that can do something really, really well, and then you could have an AI that's terrible. I'd be curious to see how AI evolves, and if something like that, like you mentioned, could actually be a reality in the near future, or is that more of a long-term vision?
I can't really put a timeline to it. Like you said, if I could have, probably I could make some money too, some serious money. But what do you think? What's your take on AI agents? What do you think of agents?
Yeah, again, I think it goes back to what I was saying before. I think if it's done well, it can be incredibly beneficial. I think there's so many impacts and practical use cases that these can have. What I'm nervous about, and I've seen on products that I use, meaning as just in and the CRMs that we're using, meaning us as in a startup, not in the industry per se, but every software that we use, there's a new AI tool. And a lot of these are just companies launching tools just to say, oh, we have AI, right? It's a chatbot that at the end of the day is practically useless. That it takes me longer to chat with the chatbot than it does for me to just search for whatever I was looking for in the old-fashioned search bar that's on the top tool of the website. So I think AI can be incredibly useful, and I think there are a lot of companies that are doing a great job at finding great practical use cases for it. But then I also, I think there's a lot of companies that are just throwing AI and within AI, the newest AI buzzword is AI agents, and people just saying we have AI agents, and okay, but how will it actually help me? It's cool, right? I'm not saying it's not, and but am I going to actually use it on a daily basis? Is it going to save me, I don't know, 5 hours a day, 10 hours a day, however I'm measuring success? Is it going to actually give me that measure of success? Or is it just something that I get excited about? I sign up for the platform or pay for the next tier because of the AI agent. And then I realize 6 months later, I'm not really fully utilizing the agent.
Sean, once again, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Adrian.